Hey, what's going on? Today I'm going to be forging out a Serbian style cleaver. This blade is going to be around 3.5 inches tall, so I'll need to forge weld some ADCR V2 flat bar to get my starting stock thick enough to forge this blade. Since I'm already forge welding some steel, I figure I'll throw in a couple layers of 15 and 20 to make the bevels a little more interesting. I've sanded and cleaned all of the steel surfaces with acetone, and then I'll give the billet a soak in WD-40 before heating the billet in the forge. Doing this allows me to forge weld without using any flux like borax, which eats away at the liner in the forge. I like to do 3 solid heats up over 2200 degrees Fahrenheit before I grind off the welds and any delaminations on the sides of the billet. Now I'm starting to draw out width in the blade using fullering dies. I like to start out forging in the tip on the press, and then I'll clean it up with a hammer on the anvil. Now I'm going to isolate the handle material from the blade. I'm using those fullering dies again to draw out a lot more width in the blade before taking it over to the anvil. Most of this hammer work is really just smoothing out the surface and getting rid of most of those fullering lines. I'm using the cross peen of my hammer to forge in the transition from the handle to the blade. Be careful if you try to do this way. If the spine of your blade is uneven, it can cause the blade to bounce up off the anvil and it goes right into your knuckles on the hammer. So it's a lot safer to use a straight peen hammer so your hand's well out of the way of the steel if it bounces up at all. I'm really close to the width that I need, so I'm just trying to squeeze out a little more width with the cross peen. This knife's getting a brut to forge finish, so I also want to make sure that I have some nice hammer marks along the spine. I really should have cleaned up the edge of the blade and evened it out sooner. I tried to smooth it out on the anvil, but the blade was really too thin at this point to get this to work, so I'll have to fix it up on the grinder instead. Now I'm going to forge in the bevels. Here I am finally getting around to cleaning up the edge. I should have fixed this sooner because now the thickness along the edge is going to be uneven. After I profiled the edge on the grinder, I ended up going back and evening out the bevels again on the anvil. Alright, we're ready to stamp it. This knife is for a 3.5 Marine, so it's going to get my maker's mark and also get the Dark Horse stamp. That's the battalion logo for 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. I'm going to anneal the blade by leaving it in the forge to cool slowly overnight. That'll soften the steel enough for me to drill some holes in the handle. I'm using Tap Magic as a cutting lubricant there. It works pretty well for drilling holes through high carbon steel. You can find links to that and lots of the other tools and materials I use in this video in the video description or on my website, davidmoonforge.com, under the product links tab. I'm going to run 3 normalization cycles in my kiln, the first at 1650, the second at 1500, and the third at 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a little peek at a custom bunka knife that I was normalizing as well. I'm heating my quench tank of Parks AAA with a torch. I shoot for around 120 degrees Fahrenheit when I quench a blade. I'm quenching this blade at 1525 degrees Fahrenheit. Here it is all cleaned up after the quench. I'm going to put it in the temper oven for 2 2-hour cycles at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. I like to file test the edge for hardness after I've taken the bevels up to 120 grit on the belt grinder. This ensures that I'm through the decarb layer and gives me a really good idea of how hard the cutting edge actually is. This blade just barely skated a 60 Rockwell file, and the 65 Rockwell file easily dug in. I'd guess that the blade is probably around 60 to 61 Rockwell. I'm going to be trying a brand new product for acid etching this blade called Gator Piss. I just got it in the mail, and this is the first welded construction blade I can try it out with. From what I've seen with Gator Piss, it gives really high contrast between your nickel steel and your simple high carbon steel. So ideally I'd be using it on a higher layer count blade, but I just wanted to see it for myself on this knife so I can get a better sense of how I will end up using it in my shop. I finished this blade more or less how they recommend on the Gator Piss bottle. I sanded it to 600 grit, and then I polished it on the buffing wheel with some pink rouge, and then I gave it a final clean with brake cleaner. I let the knife soak in the acid for the recommended 20 minutes. You can see that the 15N20 is crazy bright right out of the acid, and the 80CRV2 is very dark. That's got me pretty excited to try out some on higher layer count knives I've got coming up. I don't think this high contrast etch is a great look for this particular knife, so I ended up sanding it with 2500 grit paper to give the 80CRV2 and the 15N20 a more subtle look on the bevels. These scales are stabilized walnut with black G10 liners. If you like that hoodie, it's up on my website. Before gluing up the handle, I'm going to clean everything really well with acetone. I use Total Boat medium epoxy, and I like to add black color pigment with dark handle materials like on this knife. I let that cure overnight before taking off the clamps and getting to work on shaping the handle. You're not going to believe this, but I finally ordered a new bandsaw blade. It's not on my bandsaw yet, but it's on its way. I took the handle up to 120 grit on the belt grinder, and then I hand sanded up to 600 grit before hitting it on the buffing wheel with some pink rouge. These walnut scales have some absolutely gorgeous figuring. I got them from Mainly Wood Design on Etsy. This handle is going to get 3 coats of Odie's oil finish, and I give it at least 12 hours of cure time in between coats. Now we'll get an edge on it. I'm going to be using diamond stones to sharpen the blade, and I progress through a 300 grit, 1200 grit, and 3000 grit stone. Then I follow it up on a double-sided strop loaded with 5 micron and 3.5 micron diamond paste. I'm using some wedge-eck angle guides, and I'm sharpening this knife at a 20-degree angle. If you use these angle guides, make sure to tape the blade because you'll scratch up your finish once you start sharpening. You can see I kind of missed the cut point of the edge a couple times there. The edge is fairly straight near the heel, so it would probably be better to push cut with that part of the edge. And if you're going to chop like I was in the video, use the front half of the blade where it's got some curve to the belly. I've never thought to try cutting free hanging 550 cord, so I thought I'd give it a go here. I'm going to apply some food safe blade wax that I make and then heat the blade with a heat gun to make sure that the wax melts into all the crevices of the brut forge finish. And here's some finished shots. Thanks for watching.